Wife's friends put me through secret tests for 8 months. Their final report made me file for divorce. Congratulations, you passed all our tests. We've decided you're worthy of keeping. Those were the actual words my wife's best friend said to me at dinner last Friday, completely unaware that I'd already discovered their secret group chat where they'd been rating my performance as a husband like I was some kind of lab rat. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning my response for weeks, and it was going to destroy everything they thought they controlled. If you're into honest stories about relationships, trust, and betrayal, hit that follow button. You won't want to miss the next one. Let me back up and explain how I discovered that my marriage had become a psychological experiment orchestrated for women who thought they were qualified to evaluate whether I deserved my own wife. It started 8 months ago when my wife Monica came home talking about this life-changing pottery class. $800 for weekend workshops that would supposedly unlock her creative potential. I listened, asked questions about the curriculum, even suggested we budget for it properly. My response was supportive but practical. Apparently, that was test number 1. I had no idea I was being evaluated like some kind of specimen until last Friday night when we were having dinner with her inner circle. You know the type, the kind of women who turn every conversation into a therapy session and treat other people's marriages like group projects they can manage from the sidelines. They were discussing some drama about another couple when her friend Ashley made an offhand comment that stopped me cold. At least, he didn't react like most men would. Remember when we thought he'd blow up about the pottery thing? The table went quiet. Monica's face flushed red, and suddenly everyone found their salads fascinating. But I caught it. The slip. The admission. Interesting choice of words, I said, setting down my fork. We thought he'd blow up. Almost sounds like it was planned. Ashley tried to backtrack, laughing nervously about how she misspoke, but I wasn't buying it. I'd been married long enough to recognize the signs. The way they all exchanged glances, the sudden subject change, the fact that Monica hadn't said a word to defend what should have been a misunderstanding. When we got home, I didn't ask for an explanation. I stated what I knew. The pottery class was a test. You wanted to see how I'd react to you spending money on something frivolous. Monica tried to deny it at first, but I've never been one to accept weak deflections. I simply waited. Silence has a way of making guilty people confess. And sure enough, the truth started spilling out. Her friends had convinced her that she needed to really know who she married. They'd planted the idea that she should test my reactions to various scenarios. The pottery class was designed to see if I was controlling with money or supportive of her dreams. So let me understand this correctly, I said, my voice calm but sharp. Instead of having an adult conversation about our financial priorities or your interests, you decided to run a social experiment on your husband. The way she squirmed told me everything. This wasn't just about money or pottery. This was about respect, about whether I was worthy of being treated like an equal partner or just another variable in their little psychology games. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone, she mumbled. They just wanted to make sure you were good for me. I almost laughed. Almost. Good for you. I've been good to you for 4 years. But apparently, my track record means less than their approval. Here's what really got under my skin. I had passed their test. My reaction had been exactly what any reasonable husband should be: supportive, but financially responsible. But that wasn't the point anymore. The point was that they thought they had the right to test me in the first place. I walked to our bedroom and started changing clothes. Monica followed, asking where I was going. Out, I said simply. Unlike some people, I don't need to run my decisions by a committee first. I spent the evening at a sports bar, not because I needed to drink, but because I needed space to think. This wasn't just about one test. If they'd done it once, they'd done it before, and they'd do it again. When I came home, Monica was waiting up, ready to have the conversation. But I wasn't interested in apologies or explanations. I was interested in understanding the scope of what I was dealing with. How many tests? I asked directly. She hesitated, which told me the answer was more than one. How many? I repeated, my tone making it clear this wasn't a negotiation. 5, she whispered. 5 tests. 5 separate occasions where my wife and her friends had manipulated situations to evaluate my worthiness. 5 times I'd been treated like a candidate for a position I thought I already held. I nodded slowly, processing this information. Then I did something that clearly wasn't in their playbook. I smiled. "Well," I said, heading toward the bathroom, "I guess we know what tomorrow's conversation is going to be about." She started to respond, but I closed the door behind me. Some conversations require preparation, and I had some thinking to do. If they wanted to play games, they were about to learn that I don't just participate in games, I change the rules entirely. The next morning, I didn't bring up the tests. I made coffee, read the news, and acted like everything was normal. Monica kept glancing at me, waiting for the explosion that wasn't coming. That seemed to unnerve her more than any argument would have. Around noon, I casually mentioned something that had been bothering me for months. "You know what's funny? 6 months ago, you cancelled our anniversary dinner last minute because your friends had some emergency girls' night. I remember thinking it was strange how quickly you chose them over us." Her face went pale. "Bingo. Test number 2. "That wasn't a test," she said quickly. "That was just what? A coincidence that it happened to be the same night we'd been planning for weeks. The same night you'd specifically asked me to book the restaurant you'd been wanting to try." I watched her scramble for words. The truth was written all over her face, but I let her dig the hole deeper. "My friends needed me," she tried weakly. "Your friends needed to see if I'd throw a tantrum when my wife prioritized them over our marriage. And when I simply said, 'Okay, we'll reschedule,' that was another gold star on their little evaluation sheet." She couldn't deny it anymore. The second test had been about checking my reaction to being deprioritized. Would I be possessive, demanding, or would I be the understanding husband who rolled with the punches? I'd passed that test too. But here's what they hadn't counted on. I was starting to see the pattern, and I was documenting everything. Over the next few days, I began connecting dots that should have been obvious. The time Monica accidentally double-booked herself and had to choose between my company party and her friend's birthday. Test number 3, career versus social priorities. The weekend she suggested we host her college friends, then forgot to mention they'd be staying for 5 days instead of 1 night. Test number 4, flexibility and hospitality under pressure. The mysterious problem with her car that left me scrambling to give her rides for 2 weeks while she looked into getting it fixed. Test number 5, reliability and service without complaint. I'd passed them all with flying colors, apparently, but each revelation felt like another layer of betrayal being peeled away. What really pushed me over the edge was realizing that they'd been documenting everything. I discovered this by accident when Monica left her laptop open with her messaging app visible. There it was, a group chat called Project Evaluation with her 3 closest friends. I scrolled up and found months of detailed analysis. My responses, their interpretations, recommendations for follow-up scenarios. It read like a psychological evaluation report written by people who'd taken one-to-many pop psychology courses. Test 2, priority assessment. Subject accepted anniversary cancellation without argument or guilt tripping. No possessive behavior detected. Some concern about lack of assertiveness, but overall positive response. Proceed to test 3. They'd rated my responses on scales, discussed my emotional intelligence, debated whether my calmness was maturity or emotional detachment. But the part that really broke something inside me was a thread from the previous week. Honestly, if he keeps this up, Monica should definitely keep him. Guys like this are rare, financially responsible, not controlling, supportive of her friendships, reliable in emergencies. She hit the jackpot. Keep him. Like I was a rescue dog they were deciding whether to adopt. The final test was scheduled for our dinner party last Friday. They were going to evaluate how I handled social pressure, whether I'd crack under the weight of their collective scrutiny. The plan was to push my buttons subtly throughout the evening and see if my composure held. That's when Ashley made her slip about the pottery class, not realizing I'd already discovered their entire operation. Here's where the story gets interesting. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to give them exactly what they were looking for, a final performance that would end their little experiment permanently. I spent the weekend preparing what I privately called Operation Reality Check. If they wanted to evaluate me, I'd give them something worth evaluating. Monday morning, I took the day off work and made several important phone calls. First, to a divorce attorney, not because I'd decided on divorce yet, but because I wanted to understand my options. Second, to my brother-in-law who worked in private investigation asking about the legality of recording conversations in our state. Third, to my company's HR department about our employee assistance program's counseling services. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning clarity. That evening, I sat Monica down for what I told her would be our final conversation about the testing. I want you to call your friends, I said calmly. Tell them we need to have a group meeting. All of us. Tonight. Why would we do that? Because they've been running psychological experiments on your husband for 8 months, and I think it's time we discuss their findings face to face. Her face went white. How much do you know? Everything. The group chat, the rating system, the fact that they've been treating our marriage like their personal entertainment. All of it. I showed her screenshots I'd taken of their conversations. Her hands shook as she scrolled through months of analysis and commentary about her husband's performance. I can explain, no, I said firmly. You can call them, or I can call them myself. But this conversation is happening tonight, with everyone present. An hour later, all 4 women were sitting in our living room, looking like students who'd been called to the principal's office. Ashley, the ringleader. Jean, the amateur psychologist. Kim, the one who always played devil's advocate. And Monica, my wife of 4 years, looking like she wanted to disappear into the couch. I placed a stack of printed pages on the coffee table, screenshots of their group chat, organized chronologically. Ladies, I began, my voice perfectly calm, I want to thank you for the most comprehensive performance review I've ever received. -1 months of evaluation, 5 major tests, and dozens of minor assessments. The attention to detail is really impressive. Ashley started to speak, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. According to your final report, I've passed all your tests with flying colors. I'm financially responsible, but not controlling. Supportive, but not a pushover. Reliable, but not boring. In your own words, Monica hit the jackpot and should definitely keep me. The silence in the room was deafening. But here's what your comprehensive evaluation missed. I continued, pulling out one more document. You never tested for one crucial characteristic. Whether I'm the type of man who tolerates being treated like a psychology experiment by people who have no business evaluating my marriage. I handed Monica the paper. It was a consultation agreement with a divorce attorney. Turns out, I'm not. The explosion that followed was everything I'd expected and more. Ashley accused me of being dramatic. Jun claimed I was overreacting to their concern for Monica's well-being. Kim insisted they were just being good friends. But it was Monica's reaction that sealed everything. You can't be serious, she said, staring at the legal document. They were trying to protect me. They care about me. Protect you from what? I asked. From having a stable marriage. From a husband who passed every test they could think of. From making a mistake. From settling. From trusting your own judgment about the man you married. That stopped her cold. For years of marriage, I continued, and you still needed a committee to tell you if I was worth keeping. That tells me everything I need to know about how much you actually value your own judgment and mine. Ashley tried to take control of the conversation. Look, this has gotten way out of hand. We were just being thorough. Any woman would want to be sure about such a big decision. Would they? I asked. Because I've never felt the need to test Monica. I've never subjected her to secret evaluations or asked my friends to rate her performance as a wife. I married her because I loved her and trusted my judgment about who she was. That's different, Shun jumped in. Women have to be more careful. We have more to lose. More to lose than what? Than your dignity. Because that's what Monica lost when she let you turn our marriage into your group project. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd built what I thought was our life together. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face them. You're going to delete that group chat. All of you. Right now, in front of me. You can't tell us what to do with our private conversations, Ashley protested. You're right. I can't. But I can tell you what the consequences will be if you don't. I pulled out my phone and opened a voice recording app. I've been recording this entire conversation, which is perfectly legal in this state. I also have screenshots of your group chat going back 8 months. Now, I can either keep this information private or I can share it with your husbands, your families, and anyone else who might be interested in knowing how you spend your time. The threat hit home immediately. All 4 of them had their own relationships, their own reputations to protect. You're blackmailing us, Kim said. I'm offering you a choice. Delete the evidence of what you've done, apologize, and stay out of my marriage. Or deal with the consequences of your actions becoming public knowledge. One by one, they pulled out their phones and deleted the group chat. But I wasn't done. Now, I said, I want each of you to explain to Monica why what you did was wrong. Not why you did it, not how you meant well, but why it was wrong. Ashley went first, mumbling something about crossing boundaries. Jae-in talked about respecting privacy. Kim admitted it wasn't their place to judge. But it was the silence that followed that told me everything. None of them really understood why their behavior had been destructive. They were just saying what they thought I wanted to hear. When they left that night, Monica and I were alone for the first time in months without the invisible presence of her evaluation committee. So what now? She asked quietly. Now you choose, I replied. Them or me. Because you can't have both. That's not fair. They're my friends. They're people who convinced you that your husband needed to be tested like a job applicant. They're people who treated our marriage like their entertainment. They're people who made you doubt your own judgment for 8 months. She was quiet for a long time, processing everything that had happened. One choose you, she said finally. I choose us. But the damage was already done. Over the next few weeks, as Monica tried to rebuild our relationship, I realized something fundamental had broken that couldn't be repaired. It wasn't just the testing. It wasn't just the evaluation. It was the fact that she'd needed external validation to believe in her own marriage. She'd needed permission from her friends to love her husband. Every conversation felt calculated now. Every gesture made me wonder if this was genuine or just another performance. Not because she was still testing me, but because I no longer trusted that anything between us was real. 3 months later, I filed for divorce. Monica was shocked. She'd thought deleting the group chat and cutting contact with her friends would fix everything. She'd thought choosing me over them was enough. But you can't unring a bell. You can't unfeel the betrayal of discovering that your spouse thinks so little of their own judgment that they need committee approval for their marriage. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Monica kept the house, I kept my self-respect, and we both kept the expensive lesson about what happens when you treat love like a psychology experiment. The final twist came when Jeanne reached out to me after the divorce was final. She'd apparently been feeling guilty about her role in everything and wanted to apologize properly. I know it's too late, she said, but I need you to know that we were wrong. What we did was awful, and you had every right to leave. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Ashley's husband found out about the group chat. Someone, I think it was Kim's husband, told him what we'd been doing. He's furious. He wants to know if we've been testing him too. Apparently, the revelation that these women had been secretly evaluating someone's marriage had sent shockwaves through their own relationships. Husbands were questioning interactions, wondering if they'd been subjected to tests they didn't know about. Are you, I asked, testing your own husbands? Her silence was answer enough. The thing is, she continued, we never meant for it to go so far. We just wanted to be sure Monica was making the right choice. And what if I had failed your tests? I asked. What then? We would have told her to be careful. Maybe suggested counseling or convinced her to leave me. Maybe. That conversation crystallized everything for me. These women had appointed themselves judges of other people's relationships, with the power to destroy marriages based on their amateur psychological evaluations. I was lucky. I'd passed their tests and earned their approval. But what about the men who didn't? What about the husbands who failed their arbitrary standards? 6 months after my divorce, I heard through mutual friends that Monica had reconciled with her testing committee. Apparently, they'd welcomed her back with open arms and immediately started analyzing why her marriage had really failed. Some people never learn, but I learned something valuable from the experience. Real love doesn't require validation from committees. Real trust doesn't need external approval. And real respect doesn't come with conditions or tests. When you treat someone like a science experiment, you lose the right to be surprised when they leave the lab. Today, I'm in a relationship with someone who's never felt the need to test me. Emma trusts her own judgment enough to love me without requiring peer review. She values her friends' opinions, but doesn't let them override her own instincts about our relationship. It's a novel concept, being with someone who believes in their own ability to choose a partner. Monica still doesn't understand why I left. In her mind, She chose me over her friends, which should have been enough. She cut contact with the people who were influencing her, which should have fixed everything. But she misses the point entirely. The problem was never just her friends. The problem was that she needed their approval to believe in her own marriage. The problem was that she valued their judgment more than her own experience of living with me for years. You can't build a marriage on external validation. You can't love someone by committee. And you can't test your way to trust. The women who thought they were protecting Monica from making a mistake ended up causing the mistake they were trying to prevent. Their interference destroyed the very relationship they claimed to be evaluating. There's a certain poetic justice in that outcome. They got exactly what they were looking for, a chance to analyze a failed marriage. They just didn't expect it to be the marriage they destroyed with their meddling. Looking back, I'm grateful for their tests, not because I passed them, but because they revealed something crucial about my wife's character that I might never have discovered otherwise. They showed me that Monica didn't trust herself enough to love me without permission. And that's not the foundation for a marriage that can survive real challenges. Their evaluation process taught me the most important lesson of all. I don't need anyone's approval to know my own worth. I don't need to pass tests to deserve love. And I don't need to be kept by someone who had to be convinced I was worth keeping. Real love doesn't evaluate. It doesn't test. It doesn't require external validation. It simply chooses, trusts, and believes in its own judgment. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.